Hi everyone and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to set up our application. So we're going to be setting up our Django application and setting up our database as well as the different things that we may need. So right now I have an empty folder opened within our Visual Studio Code. So the first thing is to create a virtual environment. So I'm going to open up my terminal. I'm using Bash. And feel free to use CMD or PowerShell. For me, I'm using Bash because I'm on Linux. So what I'm going to do is to run Python 3 because I'm on Linux. Then -m, then I'll say venv, and this is going to create our virtual environment as env because we need to call virtual env as a command. So then I'm specifying that my virtual environment is going to be located within the folder env. Now, right after running this, we have a folder called env, and this is what we are going to have as our virtual environment. So I'm also going to set this up as what we're going to use as our virtual environment. So right after doing that, then the next thing is going to be to activate this. So I'll say source env, and when you're on Windows, you have something like scripts. I'm on Linux, so I'm going to have something like bin, and then I'll run the activate script, and it's going to activate my virtual environment. Now right here you can see that our virtual environment has been activated. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to install Django. So I'll go ahead and say pip install Django. So this is going to go ahead and install Django within our virtual environment. Now, after installing Django, I'm going to go ahead and set up our Django project. So think of a Django project as what is going to contain all our configurations for our project. And onto this project, we're going to be able to plug in multiple applications containing different functionalities. So the first thing I'm going to do is to run the command Django admin. So every time you install Django, you get access to the Django admin command that you're going to run to start a project. So you need to say Django admin, then run the command start project, and then specify the name of the project that I want to create. So in this case, it's going to be pizza or pizza, whatever you may want to call it. Then I'll also specify that I want this project to be created within our current directory. So the reason that's why I'm saying dot is because I want to get access to the money.py file, but I want to do that within our folder. So when I press enter, you currently see that our money.py file is actually located in our root project folder. So you need to go ahead and check if our Python installation has worked. So I'll run Python 3 money.py and then run server. Now this is going to run our server. So right now our server is running at localhost 8000. So I'll press Ctrl and click to access our server. And when you see this screen, our Django installation has worked successfully. Now, when we create our Django project, we have access to our money.py file, which is going to be the administrative file for the entire project. So right now, if I stop the server and run Python 3 money.py and then got the different options, so we can see the different options such as flash, inspect db, and so on. Those commands are going to help us to administer our application. Now within our pizza project, we have the different files. So the different files are settings, urls, wsgi, and so on. So the most important file right in here is going to be our settings file, as it's going to help us to set up our application. So we're going to write the different configurations that we want for our Python Django app within our settings.py. So I'm going to close our terminal. Now I'm going to remove these comments. Now the first thing we're going to do is to set up some of these configurations as environment variables. We may want to do this so that we keep our application secure and we don't expose these different secrets to external parties. So chances are high that you may put our code in a public repository and you may want to keep something secret. So what I'm going to do is to install Python Decouple, a tool that's going to help us to make this environment variables secret. So I need to pull up my terminal, and what I'll do is to say pip install Python. So in this case, I'm going to say Python Decouple, and this is going to go ahead and install Python Decouple within our virtual environment. Now after installing Python Decouple, the next thing we're going to do is to set up our environment variables. So we're going to create a file right in here, and I'm going to call that file .env. So this .env file is going to be the one to keep our virtual our environment variables in our development setting. So right in here, we're going to be able to paste this and copy and paste some of these environment variables from our settings.py into our .env file. So I'll go to settings, and the first thing I'm going to do is to remove our secret key from our settings. So we need to put our secret key right in here. So we need to replace this default secret key with what we're going to write within our environment variables. So I'm going to use Python secrets to generate a random hexadecimal value that we're going to use as our secret. So within our Python terminal, I'm going to type in Python, and this is going to give us access to the Python interactive shell. So I'm going to import secrets. And right after importing secrets, I'm going to go ahead and generate a random hexadecimal value. So I'll say secrets.token, and in this case, I want to generate hex. So I'll specify the length. So I'll say 12, and this is going to generate this hexadecimal value. So I'll copy it, and right after copying it, actually I'm going to copy it with Ctrl+Shift+C, and right after copying it, then I'm going to go and replace this within our .env file. So I'll say the secret key is equal to the random hexadecimal value. And right after setting it, then I'm going to go and access this within our settings file. So to access this, I'm going to be making use of config, which comes from Decouple. So I'm going to go to the top of our file and then say from Decouple, I'm going to import config. And right after importing config, then I'm going to go ahead and specify that we want to access our secret key. So I'll say that our secret key is equal to config. Then I'm going to basically pass in the key, which is the name of our secret key. So this is going to be secret key. So I'm going to also look for other environment variables. So we may want to set debug to true in development and then set it false in production. So I'm also going to copy our debug value. So I'm going to remove this and then say, in this case, we're going to have our debug value as debug. So I'm going to also set this within our .env. So I'll say debug is going to be equal to true. This is for our development environment. So right here, I may say config is equal to debug, but by default, our Python decouple gets it as a string from our .env. So we have to specify which type to cast it to in case we want it as a boolean. So I'll come right in here and say cast is going to be equal to a boolean. So when I save this, I'm going to go and basically look at other settings. So right in here, we don't have any other settings. These database settings will change when we reach the time for deploying. So hoping that everything is running fine, I'm just going to pull up my terminal, stop the interactive shell with Ctrl+Z, and run our server again. So right now, we're going to run our server with Python, money.py, and then run server. And this is telling us that we have 18 unapplied migrations. So I'm going to stop this. And when I stop this, I'm going to run our migration. So I'm going to run Python 3 money.py, and then this is going to be migrate. And this is going to go ahead and apply our different migrations on our database. So right after doing this, then we're going to go ahead and set up the different applications we want for our project. So the first application I'm going to set up is one for our authentication. So the authentication application is going to have the different logic for creating users as well as signing in users, as well as our JWT authentication specific routes. So right in here, what I'm going to do is to say Python 3 money.py, and then I'll go ahead and run the command start app, and then the name of the app we want to create. So in this case, we want to create the auth app. So I'm going to call this authentication. So I'll call the app authentication, and this is going to go ahead and create our authentication app. So if I check in our folders, right here we have our app created. So the app has different files such as the models where I describe our database, the views which contain the different views that we're going to create that are going to return HTTP responses, as well as the admin that's going to help us to register our models so that we can be able to access them on our admin side. So we have the apps which contains the different config that's going to help us to access our app at the project level. So actually what I'm going to do is to copy this app name, and right after copying this, the name of this configuration, I'm going to go ahead and register this app within our settings. So I'm going to go to settings.py, and I'll look into our installed apps list and then be able to add our app. So I'm going to come right in here and basically paste this. So I'm going to access this class by referring to the app name, then the apps section, the apps module in which it's located. So I'll come and say this is going to be authentication. So within authentication, then you're going to go to apps. So I'll say dot apps and then dot authentication. So this is going to actually be dot authentication config. So I'm going to save. I'm also going to go ahead and create our orders application. So I'm going to come and open the terminal. I'll do the same thing for our orders app. So I'll come and say orders. So when I run this, we now see that our orders app has also been created. So I'll do the same thing. I'll go to our apps.py within our orders and then copy the orders config. Now to register this, I'm going to head over to our settings.py file, and I'll do the same thing. So I'll come and say, so in this case the app name is orders, then I'll specify that the module is apps. Actually it's going to be apps, and then we shall paste in the name of our config. Right now I'm going to save. So right after saving, the next thing we're going to do is to be able to create our first API views. So I'm going to run our file. So I'll say python3 money.py and run server. So right now we can see that our server is running successfully, so we don't have any errors. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and install Django REST Framework. Now, as I said in the introduction, Django REST Framework is a set of tools that's going to allow us to use Django to build our API. So I'm going to go ahead and install it. So right now, if I run pip this, we are going to see the different things we've installed for our app, but we don't have Django REST Framework. So to install Django REST Framework, I'm going to say pip 3 install. Then I'm installing Django REST Framework. So this is going to go ahead and install Django REST Framework. Now after installing Django REST Framework, I'm going to basically create our requirements.txt that's going to contain the different dependencies for our application. So I'll say pip 3 and then freeze. So I'm going to direct it to the requirements.txt file. So this requirements.txt file is going to be created as well as edited. So for example, if I open the requirements.txt file, I'm going to see the different things we've installed, which includes Django REST Framework, and all the other project dependencies. So now let's go ahead and make use of Django REST Framework. So the first thing I'm going to do is to add Django REST Framework to the list of our installed apps. So I'm going to go to our installed apps list, and then what I'll do is to add our REST Framework. Actually, I'm going to separate these apps. So I'll say these are going to be a third-party apps. So the first I'm going to add is going to be our REST framework. Now after doing this, we get access to all the functionality that Django REST Framework comes with. So to do this, I'm going to go ahead and create simple API views that we may use to basically test if our apps are working. So I'm going to start with our authentication app. I'm going to go to our authentication views. And then within our authentication views, we are going to create our first API view. So what I'll do is to come and so I'm going to make use of Django's generic views most of the time. So I'll come and say from REST framework. Actually, I'm going to make use of REST framework is generic views. So this is going to be REST framework. I'm going to import the generic views. So these are going to be the generics. And right after doing this thing, we're going to create our first generic view. So I'm going to say create a class then this class is going to be a generic API view. So I'm going to say it's going to be a hello. I may call it a hello auth view. So I'm just going to call it a hello auth view. And what this is going to be is going to be a generic API view. So I'm going to say generics dot generic. So this is going to be a generic API view. And right after doing this, I'm going to specify the method. So in this case, we're going to just specify the get method, and then it's going to take in a request. Then we're going to return a response. So REST framework allows us to return responses and determine which kind of data and the status that we expect as a response. So we need to import response from REST framework. So I'll say from REST framework dot response. I'm going to go ahead and import our. So this is actually going to be our response class. So it's going to be response. So I'll come and return our response. And then the first thing we're going to specify is the data that we want to return for this response. So we say the data is going to be a simple dictionary containing a message. And then we're also going to specify that our message is going to be hello auth. So I'm also going to go ahead and specify the status we want to return this with. Now the beauty with REST framework is that it allows us to be able to get statuses. So I can say our status is going to be equal to. So I'm going to also import status from REST framework, and then go ahead and basically give information about the status that we want to return in this response. So I'm going to go ahead and specify. So basically it's going to be our message. Actually our status is going to be an attribute to the response, going to be an attribute to the response. So I'll say that our status is going to be equal to. So I'll specify that this is going to be status dot http. Then the status is going to be 200, and then okay. So this means that we are returning a message of hello auth and with the status code of http 200. And this is going to be okay. So for our API view to work, we're going to need to register this to actually map it to a URL so that we'll be able to access it on our API. So I'll go within our authentication application and then create a new file. So we're going to call this file urls.py. And within urls.py, I'm going to write the different URL patterns that are going to contain to be of the authentication app. So I'll come and say from Django dot urls. I'm going to import I'm going to import path. Now path is going to allow us to basically map each view function or each API view to a URL that you're going to access on our API. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a list. So this list is going to be a list of URL patterns. So you need to say URL patterns is going to be a list. And now this list is going to contain the different URL patterns. So for us to create a URL, we're going to specify our path, and then we're going to also dictate the regular expression of that specific URL. So in this case, it's going to be our root URL. So we may actually call this auth. And then actually, let's say this is going to be at our root of our authentication URLs. And then we're going to go ahead and specify our view. So I'm going to import our view. So I'll say from dot, which is our current folder. I'm going to go ahead and import our views. So I'll say from dot import views. And then right here, what I'll say is views. Then we're going to import the hello auth view. Then since it's a class-based view, we shall need to get it as function-based view. So we have a method called that dot as view method. Then we're going to also specify a name. So in this case, I may provide the name as, let's say, hello auth. Now, after doing this, then what I'm going to do is to go ahead and basically register these URLs onto our main app. So if I go to our main app, which is our pizza, this is actually our project. So when I go to the project's URLs, so right here we can register different URLs of every application that we have. So I'm going to remove this comment. And the first thing I'm going to do is to import include. Now the include function helps us to be able to access URLs in external apps. So what I'm going to do is to import include. and then go ahead and basically add this onto our URL pattern. So I'll say path and then specify that these are going to be the auth route, so they'll be accessed on the prefix of /auth. So then I'll go ahead and include our URLs from our authentication app. So in this case, I'll say include and then specify the module. In this case, it's going to be authentication. Then we're going to specify the module containing our URLs. So I'll say .urls. Now this is going to be looking for the urls.py file within our authentication app. And as long as this urls.py file contains the URL patterns, then those URLs are going to be accessed on our API. So when I save this, hoping that our server is running, I'm actually just going to run it. So when I run our server, nothing is wrong. So when I head over to our browser and refresh, so right now we don't have any URLs. So when I head over to the /auth, in this case we see that our API is returning a message of hello auth. So the beauty with Django REST framework is that it has this browsable API that we can use out of the box. So right now we have our message as hello auth. So let's do the same thing for our orders. So I'll head over to our orders.py. So I'm actually going to copy the same functionality. So what I'll do is to copy the code right in here, and I'll use the same code. I'll change a few things. So I'll go to views.py, and then right in here within our views, I'm going to basically change a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to change is going to be the name of our class. So this is going to be hello order view, and then right in here I'm going to also change hello orders, and this is going to return the same status code. So when I save, I'm also going to go ahead and create a urls.py. So this is going to be urls.py, and then I'm also going to copy the same URLs. So I'll go to our authentication app. I'll do the same thing. So when I go to our URLs for orders, I'll paste the same thing. Now, instead of hello auth, what I'm going to do is to call hello. So this will be hello order view, and this will be the same. So when I go to our main project, which is pizza, and I go to urls.py, I'm also going to go ahead and include the same URL. So in this case, we're going to access all order endpoints on the /orders prefix. So we shall access all of them here. So I'll have this is going to be include, then I'll include orders dot URLs. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. So when I go to our client here, when I refresh, when we open our server, so I'm going to go to localhost 8000/orders, and in this case we're going to get hello orders. In this video we've been able to set up our program. So we have been able to set up our project, we have been able to set up our different applications and our different environment variables. Thank you for watching, and if you liked this video, please go and leave a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.